All right. Welcome, everyone, to the first panel discussion of Adversary Village. This panel discussion is titled Adversary Simulation, Emulation, or Purple Teaming. What would you define it? We have esteemed panelists here. I would like to start the panel discussion by asking everyone to introduce themselves and give a quick idea about who they are and what they do. So I'll start with Jean-Marie as the first panelist.
Yeah. Okay, so hello everyone. My name is Jean-Marie Bourbon. My current job is working as a team leader in the offensive security service in Post-Luxembourg from now 1 year. Before that, I was a red teamer and a penetration tester in several companies in Europe, more precisely in France and Luxembourg. And a big passionate about offensive security stuff and offensive security in general. Yeah.
Thank you. Joe, can I have your introduction, please?
Hey, everyone. My name is Joe Vest. I've been focusing in security or IT and security for about 20 years now. And the last 10 years have really shift focused to the offensive security testing space, pen testing, red teaming, web app testing, all of those things. And recently I joined Health Systems as the technical director for Cobalt Strike.
Awesome. Vincent, can I ask for your introduction next?
Yeah, thanks, Anand. So hi, everyone. I'm Vincent Yu. I've been red teaming for a good number of years now, starting from in the UK and then eventually moved over to Asia where there's less red teaming, or in this case, for adversary simulation, right? So I also perform a lot of attack simulations here in Hong Kong. I run a red team here in Hong Kong, focusing on the services for the region. Thanks.
Awesome. Martin, you're up next.
All right. Thank you so much for having me. My name is Martin Ingeson. I'm the founder and principal consultant of a company called Covert. We're a small consultancy based out of Norway. We do boutique penetration testing, red teaming, and adversary simulation. And I've been doing penetration testing for a couple of different companies for 5+ years.
Awesome. Samuel, you're up next.
Yeah, thank you. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Samuel Kimmins. I'm currently a red teamer at a company called Cognizant, where we're focused on testing the defenses and improving our security posture. But I have about 10 years of IT and security experience, previously from the United States Air Force and then to a company called Recon InfoSec, where I focused 100% on adversary emulation. And that's what I'm up to now.
Awesome. So as the introductions went, we had adversary simulation, we have adversary emulation, we had purple teaming, we had red teaming. So what is it? Is it simulation? Is it emulation? Is it purple teaming? Is it red teaming plus plus? What's your definition of adversary emulation / simulation? Let's start with Jean, you first.
I guess that's a very good question. I guess also it depends on the market where you work. I guess because, for example, you have tons of companies, more or less all around the world, that are talking about red teaming, but what they provide as red teaming is more or less what we sold several years ago as internal penetration tests, nothing more. Because it's internal infrastructure focusing on Active Directory stuff, but you see, from my point of view, it's still internal penetration test, and it's definitively not red teaming for me. But one more time, I guess it depends. For my understanding, emulation is more the goal is to emulate TTPs, and you have to, for example, reproduce a well-known campaign, something like that. Where in simulation, it's more or less different because the approach, what we sell in Luxembourg, for example, is we have some flags that are defined with the customer. We define a scenario and then we execute the scenario. But we don't provide the TTP that will be tested because it's simulation and we have to adapt on what we will have to deal with. So it's more dynamic. And for red teaming, it's more or less something more complex because you have several approach. For example, social engineering, phishing campaign, for example, internal tests as well, of course, and more stuff like that. So this is more or less, to provide a quick definition, this is more or less what we sell here in Luxembourg. Yes.
All right. Joe, what do you think about the terms?
Yeah, so this is an important topic too. Definitions are important. And to be honest, it doesn't really matter what you call these. I always like to work backwards. Okay, forget about naming things because these comes with baggage. The word red teaming has all kinds of meanings. So instead of starting with red teaming and everyone's opinion, let's start at the end, look at the goals. And these goals typically follow around measuring security operations ability to impact a threat. That's usually what everything comes down to. And honestly, all testing really comes to that to some degree, and you just measure different things. So instead of focusing on let's do a red team, start from bottom down, I look at top down, go top down and understand the goal. And you want to call this. I generally put all of these under a single category called threat testing. And the different flavors are really just the definition of the day that you want to use to describe what those goals mean. Putting it all in the same category is fine. Putting it all in the same category of threat emulation is fine. Fighting those is not important. What's important is coming to a answer before you start whatever it is you're working on. And all of those definitions need to point towards the goal. The goal is important, not what you call this thing. Because red teaming, for example, red teaming, I hear all of these, it's covert testing, it's all of these like secret squirrel things. And I think, well, that's not really it. That's what you're doing with pen testing. Pen testing is there to map out attacks, to identify flaws, map out all these attacks. And that's penetration testing. It's very well defined and it's known. So if that's what you're doing in a red team engagement, then you're just doing a pen test. So you just put a different name on there. Again, that's why those names don't really matter to me in the beginning. I always start with what are the goals? What are we trying to measure? And if those goals and measurements have to do with understanding security operations, ability, the people, processes, and technology to do some sort of defense, then you start to say, okay, now we can understand what we're trying to measure and test. And this will guide you towards how covert, how overt these tests are, how closely you work with the blue in the initial or not, and that can help you say, okay, this is going to be tending towards a purple team where we're doing hand holding each other on the through this entire engagement. But again, bottom line for me is, I don't like to start with the definition. I like to start with the goals.
Awesome, Vincent. I think you've been in red teaming area for a very long time now. What's your take on this?
So I think, first of all, we've got 3 terms, right? Adversary simulation, adversary emulation, and purple teaming. I think from my perspective, we used to call it more red teaming, and then eventually I think some people had better buzzwords and new marketing terms, right? So adversary simulation came along, so we started using that as the new term. Adversary emulation, I don't use this term as much, but I also have my sort of like own view on that. I suppose adversary simulation for me is really understanding the adversary, right, who you're up against, and trying to achieve the same goals that they're trying to achieve against an organization so that they can see how well they can defend against it. A lot of people in red teaming, they may define things like getting the main admin or trying to get passwords or trying to do something or simulate certain tactics in an organization. For me, it's always been about understanding what the end goals that they're trying to achieve, right? Are they trying to benefit and get money out of the organization, or are they trying to make something happen, right? When you understand these types of goals, that they're like the sort of motives of these threat actors, then you can start understanding how you can achieve these objectives in the shortest path possible. Right? You don't necessarily need to go through all the hurdles of doing unnecessary attacks and tactics, right? And then later on, I think MITRE with the attack framework and loads of all these other TTPs, how people have started to map out every single type of tactic and attack people can do, right? This has started to put attackers onto like a heat map. I think that starts to push more and more towards adversary emulation. When I hear the word emulation, I start to think of things like automated tooling, which can run certain TTPs over and over again, so that you can test your defenses and your detections against these things, right? So that's what adversary emulation is for me. And then when we talk about purple teaming, sure, purple teaming, I think there is some aspects you can use a adversary simulation-ish hand-holding with the blue team to do purple teaming, or you can even do proper use case testing, right, or detection case testing to actually make sure that the detection cases are working, right, or the defenses are working. So that's what purple teaming is for me as well. But then also, as Joe just said, there's you call it threat services, you call it threat, whatever you want, right? But there's all these new terms that might be the future. Maybe we need to call it threat simulation or threat emulation next, right? That'll probably be a better description. So that's my take on it, anyways. Thanks.
Awesome. Martin.
Yeah, it's hard to follow or hard to come after Jean-Marie and Joe and Vincent on this, because I agree with all of you. And one of the problems that Joe kind of describes is we're having a problem usually when clients come to us asking for some sort of if it's red teaming or adversary emulation or simulation or whatnot, and they don't know what it is, and we kind of have we do the computer science kind of simulation emulation understanding of simulation is something that's similar but not exactly the same, and emulation is exactly the same, basically replaying TTPs or IOCs for that matter. So that's kind of usually the hardest part of actually defining it with the customer, and like what are you after, what do you want to get out of this exercise or test. So I don't feel like reiterating what's already been said, but that's kind of the problem that we're seeing, is that our customers don't really know what any of this is, and suddenly everyone's doing red teaming, and again, as Joe mentioned, it's often just a pen test. So that's kind of the problem we're seeing.
Awesome. Samuel.
Yeah, Martin thought he had it tough following everybody up, but I mean, we've covered all the bases, but I'll kind of give you my breakdown of it. When I think of adversary simulation, I think of your traditional red teaming, where you're intending to simulate the goals of a threat actor, right? Not any specific threat actor, but an adversary that might be targeting the organization or the client that you're serving at that time. And then on the emulation side, you're focused on emulating TTPs based on threat intelligence. And so I gave my talk earlier today, and I probably said threat intel 100 times, because that is the key driver and the key component to successful adversary emulation. And as everyone has said, clients aren't really understanding, or customers aren't understanding the difference between the two. They see the buzzwords and they think they need this kind of test. To me, like, adversary emulation is something on the high maturity scale that an organization should be ready for, because sure, we can grab some TTPs from MITRE ATT&CK matrix, but it's one thing to go and then try to replicate their malware, right? That's kind of on the high end, and probably not going to be as needed as covering their standard detections, regardless of what threat actor may be using those. And then when we get into the purple teaming, that's just simply the act, right, between red and blue, or the offensive team, the defensive team. Honestly, like, emulation or simulation can fit into that bucket as well, because regardless of what type of offensive security team you have, they can conduct a purple team operation with your defenders, right? Because the goal is to test a detection or improve a security mechanism within the environment.
Awesome. So one common thread that I see in all 5 of your definitions, all 3 are right keywords: emulation, simulation, purple teaming. There is a place for them in the flow. Red teaming, blue teaming, all of them come up in the flow. The one thing which Martin also pointed out, and Samuel, you also pointed out, clients are not even aware of what they want. What is it that needs to be done? But everyone is aware that, hey, this is the new buzzword that needs to be done. And just like a couple of years back, bug bounty came up, just like a couple of years back, red teaming came up, and everyone was like, I want red teaming done. I've also personally faced situations where they don't even have a firewall running. They don't even have anyone looking at basic security controls. And they're like, can you do a red teaming for us? So what is it that you think if a person wants to do, let's say, purple teaming, adversary emulation, or simulation, what should be the, let's say, bare minimal maturity level that they should possess before they should even start thinking about this? So we'll take the same order, or someone wants a different order?
It's
Fine
your
with the same
show.
order?
If someone wants to start, feel free, guys.
I'll jump in if that's okay.
Yeah.
Mainly, I'll jump in because I've kind of seen it from all perspective, right? I've seen it from the high maturity, like they have SOC, they have detections, they have all their logs flowing into one central location, so they can actually do threat hunting, because it goes both ways, right? So from the defensive and offensive side, you need to be at a certain maturity level before you do threat hunting or even red teaming. I feel that you need to be almost on the higher end of your SOC's maturity in order to have a successful red team engagement. Because if not, any, second-rate red team or pen testing organization is going to come through and just destroy that organization and be like, okay, thanks for the money. We'll see you next time, unless you put some actual effort into your defensive posture. So I feel like in order to take advantage of emulation or simulation or whatever you want to call it, you need to be at some high level of maturity. Whether that be just, your standard red teaming, but if you're on the low end of maturity model, honestly, that's okay too, because we all have to build ourselves up or build our organizations up, but don't go straight into wanting a red team. Hire a consulting firm to come help you build your defenses first, if you can afford that.
Awesome.
Yeah,
Who would want to take the next
I can
one?
piggyback off of that because you kind of led into what I was talking about. So I wanted to talk about the when it comes to maturity level, executing a well-designed, robust, what we might consider a red team engagement or adversary emulation engagement requires a higher level organization. But what's really important is I think it's for everyone. The reason is because the level and depth of those emulations and simulations is controlled by that consultant, whether you're an internal consultant or an external consultant. So maybe you don't put hands on keyboard. And something that's worked really, really well for me is to do a tabletop exercise. And really that's a conversation where someone says, I want you to do a red team engagement. Well, what do you mean by that? So you try to come to an understanding and you realize there's some misunderstanding. So you say, let's walk through a threat scenario and let's figure out what you think you could have prevented, detected, or respond. Because I put security operations into those three pillars because we want to move past prevention, which the world, that's a whole different topic I can get on, but the whole world just focuses on prevention, that's all. But we really want to look at the entire thing. So I take a threat. I don't care what threat it is. We find one. We do a quick we decompose that really fast into its main elements, and we walk through that with that person, with that client, even if they're not very mature, because they learn so much about, oh, this is how threat actors work. This is what's going on. Oh, that's what Kerber roasting meant. That's where you're talking about this password spray attack is, and you're really going through an education piece to walk through this, and you immediately find the gaps. They said, oh, we have no ability to stop that. We couldn't stop that. We couldn't stop that. And that could lead to say, well, that was a good exercise. We need to go do some basics. Or maybe you learn they have some ideas that say, we could have stopped all those. And you say, perfect. You have just designed an engagement for us. We can create an engagement mapped after some threat actor that has these specific goals. So I really think it's for everyone, but it's up to you as a really good consultant, again, internal or external consultant, to be able to pull this information out from those who are asking you, because they're coming to you for this advice. So if they don't understand what's going on, I would argue it's your job to educate them and bring them up to speed so decisions to improve their security.
Awesome. John, you'd like to take up?
Yeah. I guess one important thing also is, as mentioned by Joe, is also the response, because several times, for example, when you do emulation or purple teaming, you focus on use case and detection. But what happens if something happened in real life? If you don't know how to react, it's too late and it makes no sense. So it's very important to include this phase as well in adversary simulation, for example, just to validate that processes in place are efficient enough and your team is ready to react in case something happens. because it's something that is underrated, and there is a big focus by companies to detection and use case development. But okay, that's great. But if you see something and you don't know how to react, and when you have, for example, human operated campaign with a ransomware, you have a few minutes to react in a correct ways. Otherwise, you can lose everything in your business, and this is the worst scenario for a company, I guess. So yeah, I don't want to explain everything because I guess Samuel and Joe and Martin already covered a lot of topics. But from my point of view, I guess it's very important in at least simulation or red team operation to add this chapter, because it's very important to don't forget that you have the stress when something happens in real life. So if everyone is aware that there is an ongoing test, the reaction will be totally different than real life attack. And also to teach people how to react and develop processes in case something happens, to be ready and to know what we are supposed to do, even if there is a stress.
Fair enough. Martin, would you like to talk about this?
Yeah, like as already mentioned, both detection and response is very important, and I think regardless of it's as Joe mentioned, it's our responsibility as consultants to make sure that the client or company that we're testing, if it's any kind of threat testing, that they are able to receive the report, receive and integrate results that we provide. So if that's adversarial simulation, or if that's just a pen test, or if it's a vulnerability assessment or whatnot, it's our responsibility to make sure that they are able to receive and use that information. And so that also means that if we notice, or we know that we're going to steamroll this company and they're not going to understand how we did it, even though we try to explain it, as good and as well as possible, then we're starting at the wrong layer of threat testing. So again, it's very important to make sure that the client understands what they want, and we understand how they're able to receive it on their end.
Awesome. Vincent.
Yeah, so in terms of maturity level, and I suppose when are you ready for this type of testing, right? Or when are you ready for this type of engagement? I think a couple of years back, we did see some people mention like, hey, you need to be, certain maturity level before you can start doing these assessments. But actually, over the past couple of years, I've worked with clients which are really large and mature, and they have a lot of centralized logging and all of that good stuff. And they have like blue teamers who actually know what they're doing, and they can do threat hunting and, analyze all types of stuff, right? But then I've also worked with clients which, they've only got a few things in place, really, a firewall here and there, or they're trying to purchase some other products just to like piece everything together and get something going, right? And as far as they're concerned, they actually already have some detections and some prevention things in place, right? Or they may already have something which, they feel like they're already doing security. So unless you start, doing these types of assessments, how do you figure out exactly, how much can you see, right? I recently just worked on sort of like incident response engagement against Lazarus Group, right? For that client, unless they, sure, if they had a adversary simulation instead of actually get hacked by Lazarus Group, then they would have had it a lot easier, right? They could have figured out, oh, actually these things were missing. I would have been better prepared if I added these things in, right? But actually, in as opposed to that, right? Because they didn't do that, because people are saying, hey, you need to be a certain maturity before you can do anything. Then, they got hacked, right? If they got hacked, then that's how they start learning these are where the gaps are. So I think doing an adversary simulation does help, because you can then identify where the gaps are earlier on, so that you can quickly try and put things in place to cover those gaps. And it's not necessarily you have to become, you have to have all the centralized logging in place first before you can start doing that, because that, by performing these engagements, it's where you start identifying these gaps so that you can start filling these gaps, right? So, basically don't wait until it's too late, give it a shot now, try these engagements, see what you can learn from it, and improve your security posture. Right, that's my view.
Awesome. So we have two sort of sides of it. One side basically suggesting have some basic standards and then start looking at these kind of engagements, whereas the other counter view is basically do these once, realize where you are lacking, and then that gives you a motivation to start patching those things because you now know that there is an active threat which can cause problems. Which brings me to the point, how do you get the money to do any of these? So if you are a consultant, be it external, be it internal, how do you convince the people who control the purses? So CFO, COO, not your CTO, not your CISO, but people who have the authority to grant money. How do you convince them that this is required? Just wanted to understand your perspective on that. And let's do the normal clockwise this time around. So Jean, you're first.
Okay. I guess for this point, because we are working in an industry, it's very important to have some words to convince people and to explain why in 2021 we cannot and we should not deal with security like 10 years ago. Threat evolves, we have to evolve as well in our approach and what we can propose to customer. From my point of view, the best argument is that my teammates have, for example, dedicated time for R&D and so on. So they have every tool they need, every bypasses, everything ready. So what does it mean? It means that the customer pay for the mission and not for the preparation, the setup, and so on. It also means that they will pay only for the exercise and not for the preparation. So they will earn money on these previous phases, where some companies will include this in the project, which is a very, very big cost for them. And this is what they want to avoid. We also explained that depending on the needs, of course, because we have to adapt on the needs. If they just want to cover, I don't know, one specific topic, maybe just a penetration test is enough, or it depends, we have to adapt. But in the case of adversary simulation exercise, we will explain that we will cover more than basic IT security stuff, but also we will validate the process, the detection, the reaction from people, etc., etc. So it's something that works pretty well in Europe, at least. Because as I said, they can keep, if we can say like that, money because they will pay only for the exercise, and all the stuff before and after is not included. They pay only for the technical part. So it's not that expensive, but it covers very, very large and complex stuff in the offensive security, in the detection, in the incident response, etc., etc. So it's very interesting for them to see that if they pay, for example, for internal pen test for their company, it's more or less the same cost than the adversary simulation exercise.
All right.
But
Joe,
the result, of course, is very, very different because the approach itself is different. Yeah.
Thanks, John. Joe,
So-
over to you.
So in this case, convincing leadership to spend money is not a technical problem. This is an education problem. We must pull leadership into these conversations to understand the threat. I would argue that across the board, the security industry across the board lacks threat perspective. Why do I say this? It's because when you see headlines, XYZ company was hacked, and all the attack steps that occurred were boiled down into hacked. And so a new flaw comes out, new Microsoft vulnerability. Oh no, we have a new vulnerability. These are going to come. These things are ephemeral. They come and go and come and go. So we can't patch our way out of this. But that's what we find. We have a find flaw, fix flaw philosophy at the heart of our security programs. If you go and look at metrics, this is what we're driving things on. Patch management, all this. Not saying those are bad. Those are fundamental pieces that we need. But when you look at the three pillars of what I call with security operations, protection, detection, and response, we focus on protection. Or that's really what we want to prevent all the bad. And that's great. That's great. But threats are able to get past these. And what can you do if the new 0 day comes out? So when that comes out, does that mean it's game over? We're going to get hacked? Well, then it shouldn't be. And this is what we need to start bringing in. So I like to educate leadership on bringing them into the threat conversation, walking them through this, because when you're looking at these dollars, you can say, well, you better be secure. You better be secure. Well, one, it's going to sound bad, but does your organization care about security? Maybe they do, maybe they don't. Maybe they say they do, but they have a lot of money to a lot of just competing areas for spending dollars. So this, you're talking, we've got to pay our employees, we got to pay for their benefits, we've got to turn the lights on. All of these things are important. So when you say here's a security thing on the big pie of where we're going to spend money, that's one little line item. So in order to make sure that has value, we must understand that threat perspective. Because what happens, and leadership doesn't always understand this, is we're not trying to patch things. We are trying to prevent a threat from being successful. And when you can start to shift that mindset, then you can actually start getting dollars to understand that, because we are not preventing attacks. We will fail always if we're just prevent. We will always fail. What we are trying to do is to impact a threat's ability to be successful. That means sometimes your door is going to kick down, but we are going to detect and respond before that ransomware was deployed or before they steal this intellectual property. Having that conversation and understanding that threat perspective is what we need. You can't throw any buzzwords, can't use any technical terms. Not that leadership is incapable of that, it's just the wrong language. They have their own playground that they need to deal with, and you've got to come in and bring your toys. And if you don't have the right toys or anything, if you have the wrong message, they kick you out of the playground. And they continue on, and you just stand on the side and cry. But we've got to be able to come in and be willing to play in their playground, because we don't have our own place to play as threat actors and threat emulation pen testers. We're always invited to someone else's playground to play. So.
Thanks, Joe. Vincent.
Yeah, I think this was about the sort of like, how do you get investment for these types of things?
Yes.
So when I'm looking at security investments and in terms of like testing budgets, etc., I always think of it as like from a perspective of, that organization, they have a business model, they're earning revenue, right? How much of as a percentage of their revenue are they actually spending on security, and then sort of like adversary simulation or testing budgets in reality, right? If they actually get hit by ransomware, how much are they going to pay for ransomware, right? Or what the ransomware demand's going to be? If you start comparing that to the budgets that we're putting towards these types of adversary simulation exercises, it's actually only fractional, right? You can probably do like 10 adversary simulation exercises over a bunch of years, and you're still better off than getting hit by ransomware once. So from that perspective, I think it's already a good investment, right? If you communicate from that perspective. And then aside from that, also, I don't know how much people are charging for these exercises in other areas of the world, but from our perspective, it's probably only like a person and a half, 2 people, full-time employees worth of, cost if you sort of like compare that, right? But instead you're getting specialized resources which are doing this full time to be able to pull off these exercises for you as well, right? So in terms of that sort of like, comparison, I think it's just, it's a really good investment, because it's only like pennies compared to compared to actually getting hacked. So that's my view on it anyways. But actually, I've worked on red teams with smaller companies. If you can actually show the threat to, like, say, the CEO, and they can actually see, oh, wow, you've got access to the inbox, or you're calling them on the phone, telling them, hey, actually, you've been hacked, we're doing this exercise for you right now, and you found this phone number from the company database, then they get this impression like, oh, wow, if I actually do get hacked today, someone could be calling me on the phone or actually trying to blackmail me or something, right? And then he starts worrying about that. Or you can find other ways to prove impact, or get him to get their attention, towards cybersecurity. But there are many ways, and I think doing a simple, fast red team exercise is always one good way to get the attention of leadership as well. Yeah.
Awesome. Martin.
I think for us, when we talk to our customers, we usually define it kind of like a fire drill. you can either wait for a real fire and hope you're doing well, or you can actually do a drill and test to see if your procedures are holding up. So that's kind of how we try to make it less technical. Like you're testing to make sure that your procedures and you're preventing and you're detecting and you're responding to a threat, just like an environmental impact threat. It's also a technical threat. So, but we also experience that, as Vincent mentions, often we don't have a lot of technical people in the companies. Like there's usually 1.5 or just a small team of people doing the technical side of the company. And the company is not created to be secure. It's created to create money or earn money. So what I'm trying to get at here is that we have to make sure to bring the higher ups into the conversation when we define what we're trying to deliver, because in the end, when we deliver our report, or the result of the test, the IT department will probably need even more money to spend even more time doing it to further enhance or buy new products, or I don't know, hire more people. And again, that money is going to come from somewhere. So making sure that the higher ups also understand the outcome of the test, that they probably need to follow this up with even more money or even more time, or is also important. So bringing them into the same conversation before doing the testing is very important, I think.
All good, all good. Samuel, I think you got the lower end of the stick.
That's okay. Yeah, my answer kind of follows up with, or piggybacks off of everybody else's. Really, if you could show with an initial assessment, kind of here's your weak spots, and maybe even a traditional pen testing manner, and then maybe correlating those potential vulnerabilities with known threats to show, hey, not that you probably care about threat actors, but these known threat actors are known to target your industry and deploy ransomware and cost organizations, tens of millions of dollars. So really bringing the threat to the forefront and into the first initial conversation, to show them that the value is there in investing in security, whether that be just the defensive security or expanding their security operations to include some form of offensive security, so that this testing can be continuous.
Awesome. I think so far we've been talking a lot about what this is, how this can be useful for the organizations. I wanted to take a flip side with the next question. We have a large number of people who are basically looking to get into this field, who want to be people who do these adversary emulations or simulation exercises. And as people who are already in this industry, if you are to hire new people, or if you are to look at the new generation of engineers per se, and you want to give them a guidance around what they need to start working on, what they need to focus on, so that they could be a good adversary simulator or emulator, or let's say a purple teamer, what would be your recommendations? And let's change the order. How about Samuel? You get the first shot.
Oh, perfect. Yeah, this is always a tough question, because without knowing someone's full background, you can't really give them the best advice possible. But if we're talking about someone who's already in security, possibly, and they want to get into kind of adversary emulation and simulation, I would say it's first you need to be able to analyze threat intelligence or threat intelligence reports to pick out key potential attacks from their techniques, because that'll fall into our emulation bucket. And if we're talking more simulation, more traditional, red teaming skills is where that comes into play. And I think if you combine both the red teaming skills and your potentially threat research skills, you'll be well on the way to falling into either of these categories for potential employment opportunities.
Awesome. Let's hear Martin's take.
Yeah, I agree with Samuel. I think you probably don't want to start directly doing adversarial simulation or emulation. If you have a good background in IT in general, I think that's always a good starting point. We say this for security usually. Like nowadays, people educate themselves to directly to go into security, and that's not what was done way back. People have usually started doing network or server administration before they started doing security, or security was natural part of that. But I think making sure well, it's such a wide, it's being part of a red team. It contains so many different types of skills, and I think it's difficult to say like this is the best path, but having a good understanding of IT and infrastructure and networking in general is number one, and doing research, being able to integrate threat intel, being able to analyze the threats that are out there, and understanding not just the IOCs or the TTPs, but also being able to integrate them or actually do the same things that the adversaries are doing. I think that's a stretch goal for people who's interested in getting into this field.
Awesome. Vincent.
Yeah, for people getting into the industry of trying to do adversary simulation, I think definitely people from sysadmin backgrounds will work really well. With a bit of a cybersecurity passion, get in there and you can start doing adversary simulation. I think the pen testing element can always be quite easily picked up. A few courses here and there, bit of dedication, you'll get there. But then for adversary emulation, if you're looking at specific TTPs, etc., I think there's varying levels of threat actors and maturity and sophistication you're looking at emulating anyways, right? So you don't always have to have like top tier pen testing knowledge, etc., right? You can look at let's say the Conti ransomware gang, right? Just yesterday, they had the dumps put out, right? They're using tools like AnyDesk and all of these types of remote access tools, right? If you can go in your organization and start installing AnyDesk here and see if it's allowed out, or if you can control this machine without being detected, that's probably already simulating a specific TTP layer already, right? It doesn't require massive technical knowledge to perform that. But then also, I think for everyone here, we're all quite red team driven backgrounds, and we're talking about adversary simulation and emulation because we're red teamers, right? We talk about the tactics and technical, in terms of offensive security, right? But if you look on the blue team side, actually from the SOC side, if you're doing detection engineering, maybe it's worth having someone who can just dedicate their time looking at threat intelligence, right? And picking out specific test cases to simulate and test your detection cases, right? Full time in the SOC, because if you make detection cases and you don't test them, how do you know they're ever going to work, right? It's things like that where, I think you can even have a recent graduate start looking at threat intel reports using resources like MITRE-ATT&CK and actually start working on that, right? And emulating these types of TTPs. I think looking at the attack sort of like resources out there, the MITRE-ATT&CK resources is a really good starting point. If anyone's in the blue team, don't know a lot about red teaming, it's a fantastic place to start simulating threats. And then also you can, I lost my chain of thought there, but okay, yeah, I'll cut it short now.
No worries. Joe, what's your recommendations?
I'll piggyback off your blue team comments on there. I would actually argue red teaming is a subset of blue. And why do I say that? Because red cannot exist without blue, but blue can exist without red. So the only reason red exists is to blue, period. So understanding the issues that the defenders have directly maps back to what you would be as a emulator. That's what you're reporting on. That's what you're trying to do. So you need to understand The detection story is what I'll call it. What is it you're doing? Why are you detecting this? Why do we spend these monies on these tools? What are the fundamental understandings of these TTPs, these IOCs, the threat actor techniques that are being used? So things like MITRE ATT&CK are important. But so what this, you really have to have an understanding, so from the red perspective, of the challenge that the defenders has. And I tend to like to map any attacks that I have, whether they're simple or complex, back to some sort of detection and response opportunity that we expect to have on the other side. So it really forces you back to those fundamental principles of understanding technology as a core. The whole world of hacking is really just using the technology that's already been designed. There's nothing magic that's happening. We use the same fundamental principles, the same APIs, the same tools. I mean, someone wrote software, Microsoft, they provided a bunch of APIs and people write code. So there's not much difference between an adversary and a regular software developer, but maybe intent. So understanding those principles are what is the foundation of everything that we do from the red side.
Okay.
John.
So for me, I guess there is not only one option or one career to follow, one path, one that is true, one that is wrong. Coming from defensive part is necessary, of course, because for example, simulation, you also have to provide, as we discussed before, use cases improvement, not only technical remediation, but in terms of process, you have to enhance process and so on. So having a blue mindset is helpful, but also an offensive mindset. This is why I also had the pen tester perspective. When I say pen tester, I'm not talking about monkeys that run vulnerability scanners, but people that know how to exploit a weakness, how to bypass mitigation, and to get initial access. Even if, for example, in phishing campaign you have multi-factor authentication, you should be able to get a shell. If you don't, maybe you have to level up before switching in adversary simulation exercise. So once you know how to bypass mitigation and to act like a real threat actor, you can pretend to simulate it, not before. But yeah, I also agree with Vincent or Joe or Martin or Samuel. You can come from even OSINT or whatever, doing networks, because for example, when I do some interviews to hire people in my company, I saw tons of pen testers that even doesn't know how an infrastructure works, and this is not possible. You have to understand how, for example, a financial company works, what is an internal infrastructure, and how it communicates. Don't just do copy paste from MITRE ATT&CK, for example, because it makes no sense. If you don't know what is past the hash and how does it works in reality, you are just a monkey that do copy paste. This is why I said you also have to be a threat actor to simulate threat actor.
Awesome. So I think this has been a wonderful discussion. There were a lot of topics that we covered. Before we close the panel, I just wanted to take one last remark from everyone. And I would also like to know your thoughts about the village that we are organizing, the Adversary Village, and if you have any comments around that. So I would take the normal clockwise approach. Jean, you first.
I don't know. For me, it's a bit early. 5 a.m. It's a bit early. Like Martin, I don't know where you are located, but yeah, maybe in Denmark, something like that, or Norway. I don't know.
Yeah, Norway. Yeah.
Norway. Okay, so yeah, it's the same time for you. So stay strong, Jude. So no. I don't have any additional remarks or. Yeah.
Fair enough. Joe, any closing thoughts and your thoughts about Adversary Village?
No, it's been really good. This is it's been fun to watch this throughout the day and see what's going on. So it's been really interesting in these challenging times. So I was actually really happy to be part of this, and it's been great.
Awesome. Vincent.
Oh, hello.
Yep.
So yeah, I think it's a great village to have. Definitely, I think it differs from red teaming in general because red teaming to me is if you don't have context of the adversary, then you start to lose the purpose of the red teaming, right? Red teaming is more like security testing now, and the adversary simulation is becoming more and more towards this sort of like resiliency testing. So I sort of like prefer this adversary simulation testing. I think that's my closing remark. Anyways, and I hope the adversary simulation village can keep going strong, and hopefully we'll see it again next year.
Awesome. Martin.
There we go.
Yeah.
I think it's been very nice. I certainly miss going to DEF CON in person, so hopefully we'll be able to meet you guys next year. But so far looking very good. I can't wait to kick back and actually watch all of the videos because I had to catch some sleep and probably Jean-Marie as well. So yeah, it's in this time zone. So I can't wait to sit down and relax after getting some sleep and watching the recordings.
Awesome. Samuel.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks again for the opportunity. I think that Adversary Village fits in perfectly with DEF CON, right? Because we've seen like DEF CON's villages break off into very subset or very unique categories, right? Like car hacking and all that. But I like the separation from the red team, as Vincent kind of said, because we are seeing like the industry kind of pivot a little bit and start to offer those types of services for organizations that are ready for them. So I think the Adversary Village is like the perfect thing to start this year, and I look forward to seeing what happens next year and so on.
Wonderful. Thanks a lot, everyone, for being part of the panel and sharing your thoughts. Just a quick announcement for anyone watching the live stream. We have about 15 minutes of Q&A on the Discord ADV-Voice channel. So if you have any questions for our panelists, you can hop onto the Voice channel and ask questions there and get the answers. Thanks a lot, everyone. Have a nice day.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Bye.